As perhaps the strangest year in all our collective personal lives comes to an end, and a new one finally begins, it seems right to talk about goals. Goal setting is something that we generally acknowledge and plan for as a society at the end of the most regular of years. But at the end of this, our year of 2020, life is, well, a bit more complicated than usual. For many of us, jobs have been lost or changed significantly, and life has been disrupted in many unpredictable ways and may continue to be disrupted well into the new year. It makes sense that we're all hoping that 2020 leaves us behind with nary a cloud of dust, flatulence, or virus aerosols so that we can all just move on. And while it has become quite the cliche to call this trying situation we've all found ourselves in the new normal, to me, it's become just that, normal. Normal to miss friends and family more than usual. Normal to look more inwardly than I tended to pre-pandemic. Normal to value even the simplest of things more than ever before, like the cat lounging on my pretty blue Chesterfield, or the crystalline gracefulness of snow falling against an otherwise black night sky. And what I'm trying to say is that I fully expect to, at least for the first half of 2021, continue to be the same strangely homebound person that Lawrence and I have both embraced being since March. While many of us cannot just stay home because of work or other responsibilities, it's pretty unlikely that many of us will be able to travel for pleasure or see loved ones again anytime soon, myself included. So my own goals will just have to be adjusted accordingly. That said, I came up with a system last year that seems to work really well for my own goal setting, and my hope is that it'll help you too, fellow crafter. But first, a brief look into my goal setting method, which is part Gretchen Rubin, part Warren Buffett, and all parts inspired by the little and surprising successes that I seem to have manifested throughout this last year, despite some of the more frustrating life stuff that happened. Gretchen Rubin is probably best known nowadays for her hashtag year for year lists on her own personal blog, and she's created a 21 for 21 list as well, so I'll link it below for those of you who may be interested in that. I tried this method myself on December 31st, 2018, which I shared on my own blog. In fact, it was my first ever post. But quickly I realized I'd bitten off more than I could possibly chew, and it wasn't long before I began abandoning and forgetting about a few of those goals altogether, and by the end of the year, I hadn't really achieved many of them at all. Creating this channel was actually a notable exception, which makes me curious. Are you good at keeping your own resolutions? Please let me know in the comments below. So at the end of 2019, I began searching for an alternate method and found one in an unlikely source, Warren Buffett, and his former private plane pilot, Mike Flint, who claimed that Buffett had imparted some wisdom about goal setting onto him many years prior. Buffett apparently asked Flint to make a list of 25 goals he'd like to accomplish in the future. After returning with his list, he was then asked to circle the 5 most important of those goals. Flint did so and was promptly advised to focus only on the top 5 goals and to disregard the rest. In fact, Buffett called this method and those other items the avoid at all costs list. Then came perhaps the most crucial part of Buffett's advice. He told Flint only to focus on those 5 things until he'd achieved them before adding anything else to the list. At this point, you may be thinking, but I have way too many goals or interests or needs for that, because that was certainly how I felt the first time that I read this story. But while I have quite a few interests and thrive on having many things going on at once and being excited about all of them, focus was exactly what I had been lacking for a couple of years. So when I found Buffett's method, it became extremely helpful to pare down all of those varied interests and get back to basics, which enabled me then to focus on what was really important to me last year, despite the pandemic. Armed with Flint's anecdote and my 20 for 20, my naive self created a goal list. While there were definitely some hiccups that prevented me from traveling or seeing anyone in person, I decided that my 2020 goals were indeed not dead after all, as much as they were perhaps just in need of a little creativity to work out successfully. So I made homemade lemonade out of this lemon of a year because I am still quite the capable hostess, even if my only guest is my cat, who isn't a guest as much as he is basically just my owner. Yes, I know. You're always a welcome guest. And I'm happy to say that for the first time ever, I can check off over half of my little goal list, with some slight modifications, of course. This is probably a good time to let you in on a little change in my own philosophy on resolutions that has happened naturally and maybe a little accidentally over the last few years. Basically, I'm acknowledging that some things just take longer than a year to achieve. Also, people change, and so their goals are not always going to be the same either. Over the course of a lifetime, many of us will change careers numerous times, meet new people, end up with various significant others or partners, and just have a really beautiful, really complicated mess of a life. So rather than calling it a fail if I don't meet all 5 of these goals, I'm calling it a win if I succeeded at even one of them this year. And while I don't really believe in resolutions anymore, I still believe quite strongly that the end of the year is a fantastic time for reflection and for a fresh start. It's more about acknowledging the journey and refreshing ourselves than beating ourselves up over what we did or didn't do. So if you decide to use Warren Buffett's TwoList Rule for yourself, just remember to be kind to yourself too if it doesn't all happen between now and the start of 2022. Now comes the time for some personal reflection on my part. Last year, my goals were to eat only the recommended amount of sugar daily, release at least 1 YouTube video per week, move to a bigger space, follow a great morning routine most days, and make at least 3 strong, lasting connections at costume college. I am happy to say that as of filming, I have already achieved 2 of those goals. I now post content regularly for you on YouTube, and if you've been around here for any expanse of time, y'all know that we finally moved into a duplex that has way more space than our old tiny apartment did, so that's 2 down. There is a 3rd goal that I sort of achieved, and that is making 3 strong, lasting connections, just not through costume college directly since it didn't happen this year. As for the other 2, I'd say I'm about halfway to actually sticking to a great morning routine most days. And when I say most days, I mean at least 80% of the time. So that will definitely need to stay on the list for this year. And finally, the sugar thing. So far, my personal sugar problem has been a lifelong struggle for me. So it will definitely remain on the list for now too, until I can continue to eat more healthfully than I used to. While Buffett would probably say that the next step is to get hyper-focused on my morning routine and the sugar intake, I have more things that I want to achieve both personally and professionally. So that's where creating a new list and paring it down becomes really important for me personally. Then hopefully I won't get too bored to continue getting focused on the harder, more long-term goals as well. At least that's what I'm predicting for myself in the coming year. Which brings us back to Gretchen Rubin's, or rather my own, 21 for 21. After I've created my new list, I'll circle only the 3 that mean the most to me, or really in this case 4, which means that I will focus my attention on these 6 things for this year. Eat only the recommended amount of sugar daily, follow a great morning routine most days, build enough muscle to physically make up for lost time, which is probably another video in itself, eat at least 5 fruits and veggies daily every single day, and go to Paris, pandemic permitting, of course. I also have a backup goal this year because no one knows when it will be safe to travel for pleasure again, and that is to make a living wage from old-fashioned AF alone. Does that mean I won't do anything but these things? Of course not. Especially because we've been stuck indoors for approximately the last 5,872,495 days this year. I've logged more than my share of hours on Animal Crossing than I ever intended to. It means that when I'm focusing on something actually important, it'll most likely be one of these 6 things. Last year was unexpected in a lot of different ways, but hopefully focusing on what's truly important again this year can help all of us be better prepared for those unexpected challenges and make life way more fun and interesting than we ever could have imagined. If you learned something or are inspired to make a start on your own goals this year, please like this video and share it with someone who you think could use some new inspiration themselves. And then check out my reading list for 2021, which is linked in the description. Finally, it wouldn't be fair to start out the new year without thanking my fabulous fellow Crafty Club members. They keep Old Fashioned AF a fun place to learn about historic oddities, recipes, and vintage lifestyle, including the many exciting videos I have coming up for y'all this year. As of this filming, we are just 3 members away from achieving my first major club goal of having 25 members. And when that happens, I'm going to resume weekly member-exclusive sew streams. So if you would like to join and help us meet this goal, be sure to visit the Crafty Club, also linked in the description below. And don't forget to tell me in the comments, how well do you do when it comes to keeping your own resolutions? I'd like to wish you all a happy new year, and I will see you again soon for another video here on Old Fashioned AF.